Welcome to the Why Didn't I Know podcast. This is episode 31, and I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Martin. We're talking today about, is the supernatural real? You know, the first time that I really got this clear sense that there was this supernatural world was back in Ireland when I was growing up. And there was an open awareness, even though there was a lot of Catholic faith going around, there was an open awareness of psychic ability. In fact, a friend of mine who's done her dissertation on Irish culture did a dissertation on this, that there is this sense of psychic ability in my native land, amongst the Irish people, the Celtic people. And way back when, my mom's mom had passed away, and she had passed away in her early 50s. And it was really tragic because she had quite a hard life, just finished raising her last kid, and then bam, she's gone. And it just really bothered my mom. So she wanted to go see a very well-known psychic at the time, but it was very hard to get in and see him. Cut a long story short, she was able to go see this guy. Now, this guy was really good. He had so many people who verified that he was really spot on, just really accurate with bringing up very minute details from somebody's personal relationship with the person that was deceased and sharing it with them. And he had this go-between between him and the supernatural world that he called Penny. And so he would call on Penny, and then Penny would go and meet the deceased person and give him all the details. When my mom went and did this, she was able to, first of all, she came back. I wasn't at the session, but I was way too young. It probably would have freaked me out. But she came back from that session, and there was just a glow. She was about her. Like, she was just lit up. There was so many details that he passed along. And he doesn't interview you ahead of time. He wasn't asking a bunch of details ahead of time. But there were so many details passed on to my mom that it was without a doubt that this was an actual real communication. And here was this woman who had a really tough life, but she was telling my mom in her quaint Irish way, if you knew what it was like over here, you'd pack your suitcases and come. Just quaint way she talked. Now, thankfully, my mom didn't decide to check out right then because I needed a mom, but she just, all her worry and concern that, oh, my mom never got to live a life and this is awful, it's so tragic, that went out the window when she came back. She was like, wow, yeah, there's something to this. She's having a continued existence. That was the deal. It wasn't that she was just talking about all these past memories. And so after that happened, it didn't feel strange to me. I had had experiences already prior to that, where I was walking out in Glendalough, a very beautiful, lush place in Ireland, and I had felt like there were little beings. I learned the word elemental a lot later. I didn't know that word back then, but I guess I would call them elementals. I call them fairies. I call them little angels. And I could see them pop through the forest. And if I was having a normal conversation with someone in my family, that would not happen. It would have to be when I was in this kind of daydreamy space, lost in the woods on my own. But you know what? As a grown woman, that happened again when I was in France. I was on a Mary Magdalene trip, and I was in the deep forest. Actually, there's a place called Merlin's Forest, of all things, and it has this really old tree that is on its side, and it looks like a harp. But it's made out of a tree, and nobody carved it that way. Nobody made it that way. It just looks like that. And it's been sitting there for a long time. The people that lived there that we went with, they were showing a group of us this tree, but I wandered off, and the green there was just so radiant. It just sparkled in a way that seemed almost like virtual reality. It was just absolutely amazing. And we're in a place where I live in a city now. And if I go to the park, you hear traffic. Traffic is still not too far away. But there, we're so far away from where anyone lives or from any other town or anything that the silence and the quiet and the calm was just takes you over. And I found myself wandering into this one area in the forest where there's just trees and they were covered in moss and they just seemed so peaceful. And even though I was a grown person by this time, I just felt drawn by my heart, not my head, to go and to embrace this tree. And I swear to God, like I'm doing no drugs, no nothing, totally sober. And I am on a psychedelic trip. Like I am in another world with this tree. We're having like a two-way communication. They're loving, like they're loving beings, and I'm loving it and it's loving me. And we're just in this dance of vibration. It was so frigging amazing. And I had zero awareness that, okay, I'm a visitor to France right now. At that time, I lived in the United States. I had no bearing about why I'd come to France, what my regular identity was. All of that was out the window. And I was just this pure essence with these pure beings. And I've since talked with some people about that. And they're telling me about the concept of vortexes and the fact that, which I had heard before and I accepted because I lived in Arizona for a while and everyone talked about going to Sedona for the vortexes. Well, I went to Sedona a number of times. I never felt any vortexes there. But in this place in France where nobody told me to expect that, here I was in this complete state of otherworldliness. And there was definitely this quality of the supernatural. Now, I didn't contact any beings there. I just contacted the trees. But after those experiences, I just am convinced that there is this other world. Now that I've reclaimed some of my Irish heritage that I didn't get from growing up necessarily. Most of my relatives are very still in the Catholic vibe, and they had lost a lot of the beautiful heritage of supernatural awareness that people living in that region of the world have. But now that I have looked back on that, I've realized that there was this awareness of the veil thinning in my Native heritage, in my Irish culture. At certain points on the land, you could contact otherworldly presences. And on subsequent visits back to Ireland, I've been to like the Hill of Tara, which is as old as Stonehenge, but no one talks about the Hill of Tara. And it is a sacred site that is very much tells us that sexuality was part of their sacred rituals. Now, I hadn't planned on talking about this on this episode, but you walk down this long canal, which is like a vaginal canal, to this open area. It's like a womb. This is underground. And at the perfect time with equinox, the sun comes through that particular angle and it lights up this inner canal. And what's believed to have happened is they actually did the rituals there. So there's this beautiful awareness of the supernatural. We're not just physical beings. I mean, how can we tap into this awareness by going to these different places where this concentrated energy is, like I mentioned in France and Sedona? How can we do that if we're just a physical being? Well, we're not just physical. And unfortunately, this science has been kept from us. We don't learn about this in college, but it's known. And in my courses, I talk about the work of Dr. Claude Swanson, who worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. And this science is very much known, but we're not told about this. And so we think that we're just a physical being. But being just physical does not explain how people, like in my native country in Ireland, could see behind the veil. At some point in American culture, that was seen as, you better go to a psychiatrist if you're talking like that. And in fact, we still treat people like that today. People that have a psychedelic experience that doesn't stop. So what I mean is they do a psychedelic and they come back from their trip, but they're still having bleed through experiences. So they're still having a flash of a larger reality. They're still feeling sometimes like they're floating. Unfortunately, people will go to a Western doctor and talk about that this is happening and talk about that it started with the psychedelic, because Western medicine denies that the supernatural world is real and that we're anything more than a material being. Unfortunately, they get put on psychiatric medicine, and that ends up making them a zombie, basically. And it doesn't have to be like that. We need to learn. It's imperative as these energies are coming more into the earth. And that's one of the things that Dr. Swanson, unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, but he had really wanted to spread the information that there is a consciousness shift going on in the planet, where this supernatural world is going to bleed into this physical world more. And more people are going to open up to this ability. He was wanting to go around and spread this news to tell people that you need to spiritually prepare for this. And that's the thing. Can we be in the world, but not of the world? We are going through a consciousness shift, not just personally, but collectively. And sometimes it's darkest before the dawn, but that doesn't mean it has to be a bad experience for us. We get to choose our own adventure, and we can't control what happens to us to some extent, but we definitely can control how resilient we are. And I'm not talking about digging your heels in and saying affirmations. I'm talking about being tethered to a higher reality, being tethered to a reality that you are first a spiritual being and then a physical being. And I know those words get thrown around a lot, but over time, I believe that these concepts are going to be more integrated into our life and hopefully into our college classrooms as well, because we really need to be equipped with this understanding of this supernatural aspect of ourselves, supernatural aspect of the world, so that we can navigate this. And so we can also steward our consciousness. I was listening to a podcast recently with Aubrey Marcus and with Andrew Gallagher, and they were talking about this very thing, that we really need to acknowledge during psychedelic experiences, people are having these encounters and they're not physical. It's not just in their brain. It's actually on another dimension. And let's face it, they were talking about some of these entities you can encounter don't want you to thrive, like actually want to harm you. And there can be an after effect from that where you can't necessarily sort out whether something is your own thought or the thought is actually coming from beyond you. Now, that can sound just downright crazy if you haven't really navigated these other dimensions. But I've worked with people who have done psychedelics and they didn't believe a supernatural world was real, but then something started to change in their life, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. And part of me helping them was to actually sort out, okay, was this thought from you or was this thought from some other realm? And it's not a helpful thought. And so we have to choose differently. And when someone starts having that kind of intrusive thinking right after psychedelics, we really need to do people a service and not just look at it from a normal psychotherapy model, that it's their own intrusive thinking. I've had people that have tried to just hash this out with a normal psychotherapy model and thinking about it's their inner parts, and it drives them frigging crazy. They never get resolution. And then I've worked with them, and because I don't think it's weird and I don't think you're crazy, if there is a sense that you can either see other entities or you can hear them. Some people are very shy about and very worried about telling a professional that this is happening to them because they don't want to get locked up. But I know that exists, and I don't see the person as a possessed person or anything like that. But in order for you to get back your spiritual sovereignty, you got to know what you're dealing with. Is that intrusive thought from yourself, or is it from somewhere else? And so I've successfully helped people to work through that and to actually gain back their sovereignty. And it's like going from an extremely stressful time in your life where you just are feeling like you're not able to cope to being able to turn that all around. And it is possible. But if we don't have the framework that there's supernatural aspect to this. And let me clarify, not everything can be seen by the supernatural lens. Sometimes it's just your own stuff, and that's great, and you still need to work through it. But it's not always that. And as Dr. Swanson talked about, the veil is getting thinner for us living on this planet. The ability for other realms to influence us is getting easier. Now, that can be super beneficial when it comes to beings that you connect with that want the best for us. And there's certainly those beings out there. Makes me think of a woman who's from Ireland. Her name's Lorna Bryan. She came from a very poor family. She was dyslexic, and they decided not to put her through school. They decided to just keep her at home. And so she never got an education. And so she was alone a lot. And what she did was she just naturally, intuitively, as a child, developed a very strong relationship with angels. And she was able to see them from early on, and they became her lifeline. And she felt a real strong nudge from the other side to write her experiences, to share with people that angels aren't weird and we can contact them, and that everyone has a guardian angel and so forth. She got a book deal, and her books have now been out for years and years. Angel in My Hair was her first book, and she's written many other books. What is interesting to me from more of a science-y perspective is we have dimethyltryptamine, which is a neurotransmitter, which is the spirit molecule, and we have that inside our brain. And when DMT is taken as an external substance, it gives us the sense that we can talk with entities. It gives us that ability, but it's also inside of us. When you are a kid and you can take, for instance, a cardboard box, and all of a sudden that cardboard box is no longer a cardboard box. You see it as a pirate ship. Kids can use their imaginations to create something out of nothing all the time, and they're convinced of it. I've talked with some researchers that hypothesize that the DMT levels inside of us are higher when we're quite young. Now, that reduces for various reasons, but one could say that as we start to develop our analytical functioning and go through the educational system, we switch to another mode in our brain, and that imaginative self takes a back seat. This makes me think about this woman who wrote the book Angels in My Hair, that she didn't go through any formal education. And she actually had to speak her book into an audio software, and someone else had to type it, because she still to this day, she's in her 70s, but still to this day, she does not know how to read and she does not know how to write. And so she's not processing analytically in the same way people who've gone through the educational system have. It seems to me that she never lost this ability that young children have to see into the other realm. That possibility exists within all of us. It's interesting, whenever I've watched her speak, she has said, I'm not wondering why I have this ability. I feel like it's totally natural. I'm just wondering why you don't. And she's talking to the audiences who think it's just bizarre or magical that she can talk to these angels. And she's saying, why don't you? It makes sense why the average person, especially in Western culture, just really focused on the here and now, trying to make things happen, accomplish things, go through a very linear educational process. All of this is training us out of that intuitive, natural contact with nature, contact with the land, contact with an intuitive sense that knows these things, that knows that there is this benevolent spirit, that there's this supernatural realm that's there and that wants to help us. And there's lots more I can say on this, because one of the things that's really important for us to understand when it comes to the topic of sacred sexuality is if we don't understand that there's a supernatural realm, we'll never be able to fully realize our sexual potential in terms of transcendence, in terms of merging with the mystical, because we'll always only see our partner and ourselves as just these physical beings. But that's all for another episode. And I'll just let you know that I'll be uploading more frequently and also interspersing some chats with other people on this podcast as well. So it won't just be me talking. It'll also be in conversation with some other people that I believe you'll find interesting. So thanks so much for joining me. Please leave a review for this podcast and subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.